Kim Newman of Empire magazine called this film an acutely observed, beautifully performed, lovingly directed media morality tale that resonates far beyond its 1950s setting. New York Times critic Janet Maslin called it a rich, handsome, articulate film about a subject truly worth talking about. And Letterboxd user Yeah Boy said maybe I'm a sucker for great screenplays with great dialogue and great flow and pacing, but I very much loved it. And my boy Martin, being a slimy corporate fuck, loved it. And was that a split-second Ethan Hawke's cameo? Great movie. On this episode of Ruined Childhoods, we decide the fate of Quiz Show.
Sequel. Reboot. Which one will it be? It's the Ruined Childhoods podcast.
Greetings, Starfighters. Welcome to Ruined Childhoods. My name's Dan, and with me is my brother for real, John. How's it going, John?
You keep on saying brother for real. Yeah.
Well, but I mean, I don't know if someone's listening to this for the first time. You know, I
don't think that anybody's expecting for you to be using slang, though. Like, you know, referring to me as your brother in a figurative sense.
Okay. All right. Noted. I will put it in my notes. I appreciate the feedback. Thank you. I will refrain from that specification in the future.
It's all good. Dan, how are you?
Oh, I'm well, John. Well, indeed. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I am just trying to figure out, just a little bit of behind the scenes. I'm about to move into a new house, so I'm kind of trying to figure out, like, how am I going to set up my, like, recording area? Where am I going to do that? How am I going to do that where it's not going to be echoey? All of those things. And yeah, so that's at the front of the mind. But I've been really enjoying watching all these Robert Redford centric classics recently. I feel like I've gotten a little bit ahead of the game. And also, certain things have come up on other episodes that have encouraged me to watch other movies, like Snake Eyes. I think we brought up on maybe the last episode or the one before that.
Oh, yeah, because we were talking about, De Palma, and I had been watching...
Yeah, we're talking about De Palma.
I'd been watching Dressed to Kill.
Oh, okay.
And we talked, right, and we were talking about some of, just an appreciation of De Palma. So anyway, so Snake Eyes, yes.
Yeah, which I'm pretty sure I had seen before, but I found it so enjoyable that Kevin Dunn is in it, yet Gary Sinise's character's name is Kevin Dunn. And I just love that. They didn't have to do that. They didn't have to either cast Kevin Dunn or keep Gary Sinise's name as Kevin Dunn. What a funny thing.
It is, it's funny. I think Snake Eyes is one of those movies that I've never watched the whole thing.
Oh, really?
I feel like I've just seen it in bits and pieces. And I agree, like, it's so much fun, but I'm always, that was a good, half hour of Snake Eyes. And I think I've seen the first, like, maybe 30 to 40 minutes.
Well, I mean, the first shot is this long shot, well, seemingly long shot.
Yeah.
And, that's fun. And I believe that the movie actually takes place in real time. It's like one of those. That was a hip thing to do. So it's, I don't know, it's fun. The ending, not to give anything away, but like it's kind of funky the way that they do it, where it's just like, ooh, you could have just ended there. And then it like keeps on going even further. And it's like, but you could have ended so long ago and it would have been fine. Like, it's kind of funny.
That's kind of a De Palma trademark, is being just a bit extra.
Sometimes, like, okay, remove the just a bit, but and I don't remember if I mentioned it, but also just wanted to kind of shout out the documentary De Palma,
Never seen it.
which was kind of like something that had triggered my interest in looking beyond, my notions of Brian De Palma, which had previously been like, okay, a decent, kind of Hitchcock pastiche, filmmaker slash, like he's got a good style, because The Untouchables is, loaded with homage to cinema,
Right.
but it definitely has a different style than I think a lot of his earlier films, which I think Snake Eyes goes back more to the De Palma style, and like Raising Cain, I feel like was after he did Bonfire of the Vanities, which was just a disaster. And I feel like he was like, after that, he was like, fuck it, I'm not going to try to win Oscars anymore. I'm just going to make the shit I want to make and like have John Lithgow do crazy shit. And that was Raising Cain.
And that was Raising Cain.
And Raising Cain's a great movie that perhaps someday we will talk about on this
I'd
podcast.
love to. I've actually never seen it, but I love John Lithgow.
Oh, all right. Yeah, definitely on the to-do list.
Yeah. Once we get through our stack of Redfords.
Yeah, seriously. And yeah, we're not really doing a theme month. It is just we are just exploring the filmography of Robert Redford, because
Here's how that went
Why
down, just to our dear listeners. We both just wanted to watch a bunch of Robert Redford movies. So there we are. And the one that we're talking about today is not in, but directs. We've talked about other, when we did Lions for Lambs, he directed that one and was also in it. We did Lions for Lambs simply because I wanted to do a month of vaguely March themed movies.
Yes.
And it just kind of fit.
And I enjoyed
otherwise
doing Lions for
I don't think
Lambs.
we would have ever done Lions for Lambs, but it gave me an excuse to watch it, and I enjoyed it, and Robert Redford was great in it, and I thought did a hell of a job directing it as well.
Because I feel like Lions for Lambs, at least for me, and I feel like for a lot of people, it's probably one of those movies that you pass when you're like scrolling through the options and you see it streaming and you're like, huh. And then you just go past it.
It's like Robert Redford, okay. Andrew Garfield, interesting. Okay, Meryl Streep, Tom Cruise. And it's like you're about to press play, but then for some reason you just go like, yeah, let's see what else there is. I surely would have heard more about this if it was that good.
You're like, okay, and I haven't heard of it.
Yeah.
So, but yes, he directed Quiz Show, and was not his first directorial effort. Previously directed, among other things, A River Runs Through It. Ordinary People, I think, was his directorial debut.
Which is one hell of a movie.
That he won the Oscar for, like, famously beat Martin Scorsese, for Raging Bull.
Who he then cast in Quiz Show.
Exactly. Well, and he also casts, we talked about Barry Levinson, director of The Natural, also in Quiz Show. But it also, like, both of them, Scorsese and Levinson, have, like, decent supporting roles. They're not just little cameos.
Right.
So yes, so we're looking at the career of Robert Redford. He was he nominated for Quiz Show? Yes, he was nominated for Quiz Show. It was nominated for Best Picture. I think it was nominated for a lot, but didn't win because that was the year of Forrest Gump versus Pulp Fiction.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
With Shawshank Redemption as the, dark horse third party candidate, and Four Weddings and a Funeral thrown in there for Brits and giggles.
Yeah, well, when you're making a movie, sometimes you just don't know what other colossal
Well, no,
successes
also,
are going to be on the cusp.
Well, and also
know?
it's like, and that's also, I'm not saying that's like, the point of it. And it's such a well-made movie. It's a movie that I did not see in the theater, but saw on VHS upon its release. And I've just always enjoyed it. I'm intrigued by the.
Well, I feel like I've always remembered you being a Turturro fan, and I think that like, just having like known you at the time, or like whenever you would have been talking about Quiz Show, be like, oh yeah, well John Turturro's in it.
But the funny thing is, though, like that John Turturro, as great as he is in this, and I was after Barton Fink and Brain Donors.
Yeah,
I was definitely, like, what else has this guy been in? But John Turturro was not if anything, like Ralph Fiennes, who,
well, this is
saw
also the same year.
List.
Right. Wasn't this also the same year as The English Patient?
No. English Patient came out 2 years after Quiz Show. Came out in 96.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay.
So, but like Ralph Fiennes, like Schindler's List, he was just incredible.
Right.
In that. And I think this was the next thing he did after
the follow-up. Yeah,
so and also, I mean, just the subject matter, the history of it, this was a real thing that happened,
right? And I just want to address something else, and it's interesting because the last movie that we did is The Natural, was The Natural, and that's a movie that came out in the 80s, came out 10 years before Quiz Show, and it's about baseball in the 30s. So it's interesting to me that we're doing, these movies that kind of take place, they're period pieces, and it's kind of like going a similar number of years back in the past.
It's interesting that we haven't done A River Runs Through It, which I think takes place in the 20s.
Oh, really? Yeah. Yes, I haven't seen A River Runs Through It, but I don't know if it's just that I know it was definitely popular to make movies about the 50s and the 30s. I think that there are some decades where you don't see as many movies like now being made about like the 80s or 90s in the same way. You see some every now and then, but like it's not done the same way that like in the 80s and 90s they were making movies about the 30s, 40s, and 50s.
Though I would say in our contemporary context, a lot of these, like, I guess, mini series that are, streaming, and you've got like the impeachment effects, like all these like Ryan Murphy, impeachment and the OJ thing and all that. Like, these are things that might have been movies, but
sure. Well, but I kind of want to tack on to what I was saying, in that you see a lot more movies being made. I will just say, like, lately, if they're not, present day or in the future, if it's going to be in the past, there's a lot of stuff that's like in the 70s. And I feel like a lot of it has to do with, making a movie that takes place in the 90s. People just didn't look as cool. I don't know, like things just didn't seem as cool in the 90s.
Well,
and so it's like, I think it's harder to sell something where it's, I think that, this was 2000. This took place in 2003, but a movie like Spotlight, where it's just like this era where people just kind of didn't really.
There wasn't a lot of
the
flash.
Fashions of the time were a little like,
Denim and flannel.
We can just ignore that, and frosted tips and. Pleated khakis.
It's funny because you have like the early to mid 90s, where it's grunge and
Right.
It's kind of like, what are you gonna do? Remake Reality Bites and Singles?
Yeah.
You know, so you've got that, and then there's like I feel like the death of Kurt Cobain kind of sent things spiraling, and next thing you know, we've got Zoot Suits and Swing.
Yeah.
You know, revival. Like, that's when I would want to. I would do a movie set in 1997 against the Swing revival.
Oh my God.
of like that year, like 1996, 1997. Like, throw a lot of Mighty Mighty Boss Tones and like Real Big Fish on the soundtrack. There you go.
Yeah, that was a weird thing that happened, but it's kind of funny because like, you know, the 90s were definitely an era where there was a bit of an identity crisis. And I think that you're right in the sense that like grunge had its own special thing. And, you know, the death of Kurt Cobain kind of, you know, it put a bit of a punctuation on grunge, where then those grunge acts turned more into just like alternative rock and then more mainstream rock. I'm thinking of bands like Pearl Jam. Yeah, exactly. And, you know, then of course you have, you know, Soundgarden, Audioslave, all of that kind of stuff. And some of the other bands just kind of disappeared a little bit, maybe went more into obscurity. I mean, certainly, you know, you'll see, you know, like bands like Dinosaur Jr. continued on.
Right.
Stuff like
but
that.
But they were also part of it.
Evolved into a different type of like indie rock, alt rock kind of a situation.
Well, and like those bands were also, I think, more on the margins than, you know, like Nirvana. Like Dinosaur Jr. stayed, and I think that was kind of like, you know, part of their thing. Like, you know, Flaming Lips, another example. But it's actually interesting. You know, one of in my like, you know, creative time when I like to toy with screenplay ideas and never finish anything, but one of them is actually set in 1994, and it's kind of and you talk about that identity crisis, and it is kind of about that because it's set in the fall of 1994. So, you know, in the wake of kind of, because that, and there were other like deaths, other real tragic deaths in that era, like Shannon Hoon from Blind Melon and Lane Staley, from Alice in Chains. So it kind of, like you said, really punctuated that era, but also I
wouldn't say it put like a definitive punctuation, more of just like a semicolon, not a semicolon.
No, but it was,
you know,
but it was all like, you know, and then the next thing, you know, Weezer's like the big thing.
Well,
and
right. So I think that what I was really thinking about is how like, and you know, you started to really say this, where it's like, you know, grunge ends and it because of this, you know, very significant death. And by the way, I realize that we've gone way crazy off topic, but I swear we'll get back there. We're coming back. So, you know, this very significant death really shakes things up, and it's almost just like the world of popular culture, more specifically music, is just kind of like, well, we had this idea that this was where things were going, but I guess not anymore. So like, what do we do now? And it's like, I don't know, swing dance. Let's try that. Maybe like ska will get more popular.
It was like, I mean, it was like, you know, it was like Weezer, Offspring, Green Day. It's like, we have this, and then swing dancing. But anyway, John, you made so perfect parallel segue, because you kind of have that sudden, that end, that kind of like wake up call, the you know, cold slap of reality, which is a lot like what happens in Quiz Show, where the kind of the facade, and it's very much about the facade of the 1950s and how the media was so instrumental in creating that facade, but also in really understanding the manipulation of people.
Yeah, I think that it's it's no like it's not hidden that the way that this story is told, which this was a true story, but the way that it's told makes it feel like it's more of like a Cold War allegory. If there's to be some sort of more, analytical spin to be put on Dick Goodwin's memoir that this is, based off of, there's definitely a lot of that's put into it. And it certainly makes sense to do that, and using television, which at the time that this takes place, which is 1957, television is still very new, and it's a bit of the Wild West, similarly to what we're seeing now with like the internet and the 24-hour news cycle, and the way that information comes to us. And at that time with television, they're saying this game show, the questions have been sealed in a bank vault, and you can say whatever you want. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. And nobody's really been questioning them about this. Like, really? Are they really sealed in a bank vault? And then we see how things are really happening behind the scenes, manipulating the viewers to sell Geritol.
Of course. So, John, why don't you jump into the synopsis before we go any further in talking specifically about Quiz Show?
Sure. So, by the way, Dan and I guess about an hour ago, texted, and Dan was like, "Do you want to record tonight?" And I was like, "Sure. Just need to write the synopsis." And this is all like me typing on my phone really super fast, just trying to like get all of my memory of this movie, which, I've seen so many movies since then, but, just on here. So I feel like I got it. So let's see how this goes. 21 is the hottest show on television, but it's only 1957, so options are a little limited. 21 is a game show hosted by Jack Barry and sponsored by Geritol, in which two isolated contestants answer advanced general knowledge questions, wagering their points until one of them reaches 21. Jeopardy style, the winner moves on from week to week until they are dethroned. As the film begins, we meet the reigning champ, Herbie Stemple, a Jewish man from the outer boroughs of New York who is the talk of the town. The only problem is that ratings have plateaued, and the network wants him to be replaced by a more handsome champion. They ask Herb to take a dive, and in return they would put him on a panel show. Herb reluctantly agrees and takes the fall on a very easy question. This means that the new champion is the dashing Charles Van Doren, the son of famed poet Mark Van Doren and nephew to famed biographer Carl Van Doren. Charles, a bright scholar on his own, was then fed answers by the producers in order to keep his streak going and the ratings climbing. Meanwhile, a young attorney from the House Committee on Interstate and Foreign Commerce, named Dick Goodwin, picked up a thread about potential rigging on the show 21. This led him to several past contestants, including Herb Stemple. Herb admitted that he was also fed answers and that every moment of the show was scripted down to the way that they dabbed their sweat. Herb became enraged when the network backed out of their agreement to put him on the panel show. He also claimed that there was an anti-Semitic discrimination afoot. Goodwin also became close with Charles Van Doren, who did his best to come across as unsuspicious as possible. Goodwin even joined Charles for his father's birthday celebration. This gave Goodwin a much better insight into Charles and his motive for having success outside of his family's enormous intellectual shadow. But then Goodwin gets a smoking gun from a past contestant who mailed himself a sealed postmarked envelope containing the answers to the show that would tape 2 days after the marked date. Knowing that he's backed into a corner, and after confessing to his father, Van Doren deliberately loses the show. At the hearing, Stemple fails to provide a reliable enough testimony, so Van Doren is subpoenaed and gives an honest testimony that ruins his careers in both television and academia. But this doesn't mean that the case against the network is won. The producers take the hit, saying that they acted on their own. And so I'm just going to run down the cast list a little bit. John Turturro is Herb Stemple. Rob Morrow from Northern Exposure is Dick Goodwin. who's so good. I thought that he was fantastic.
He got a lot of flack for his performance too. I think mostly the New England accent, but yeah, no, I think Rob
thought he
Morrow
was
does a
good.
fine job. Does a fine job.
Yeah, I thought that he was totally good, and I was just like, why have I not seen more of him? I know he's been very active, but it's just like, man, like, can't believe we didn't see more of him. Ray Fiennes is Charles Van Doren, and he's amazing. We have David Paymer as one of the producers. Paul Scofield as Mark Van Doren, who's so good.
Wonderful. He was Academy Award nominated for this.
Oh, good. He was fantastic. We have Hank Azaria, Christopher McDonald as Jack Barry. We have Mira Sorvino as Sandra Goodwin. This is just a really, really fantastic cast. Martin Scorsese plays one of the like executive producers, I guess.
Yes, he's a network. You got Griffin Dunn in there, so you got Scorsese and Dunn together again after hours.
After hours, yeah. Griffin Dunn is more like a cameo than any of the others.
Yeah. He's the Jerry. You got Timothy Busfield up in there.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah,
it's a really incredible cast. You have a very young Callista Flockhart as one of Charles Van Doren's students.
And Ethan Hawke, speaking of reality bites.
Speaking of reality bites, that's right.
Yeah.
And it's a really incredible cast. I feel like it must have taken some restraint for Robert Redford to not appear in this himself, because clearly there are many places where he could have gone. He could have been the head of NBC. He could have been the Martin Scorsese character. He could have been so many different roles, but, I don't know if it was a choice to not appear, but
yeah,
so good.
I don't know. Yeah. I kind of don't see him like, and I love Robert Redford, otherwise I wouldn't have agreed to watch like, I don't know, a dozen of his movies, back to back, but, I think that, if it was restraint, then good on him. If it was just like, awareness and recognition that his appearance in the movie might be distracting from the story or might stand out. I mean, like,
but
you really
as we saw in Lions for Lambs, he's very present in that one.
But he fits into that perfectly.
Yeah.
Yeah. This I don't see as much. But anyway, it's great. Like Ray Fiennes is excellent. I love it's a very slick feeling movie.
Yeah, it moves. It's really engaging. I think that it exists in 1957 in a way that is identifiable without feeling like you need more, not having lived in 1957. I feel like this all felt right to me.
Right.
It wasn't like, hitting you over the head with like 1957 type stuff. It was just like, this is the story. Here we are. Here's what's going on.
Right. Yeah. No, it wasn't all about, like 50s. Let's have like the soundtrack and all the songs that you need. Yeah. In fact, it uses like Mac the Knife in a really, I think it opens and closes with Mac the Knife, because is Mac the Knife playing in the opening when he's looking at the car? Goodwin is,
oh, I think you're right. Yeah.
And then it closes with that like kind of slow, more like loungy version of Mac the Knife, which is, a really, really interesting choice. But the score is excellent. I mean, it's
great.
It's just a really well-made Hollywood movie, just like one of those, it's just an excellent example of a genre film about a, true controversy in history.
Yeah. And I think that if you, look at, like, as we've mentioned earlier, like those early successes of Ray Fiennes, Schindler's List, Quiz Show, The English Patient, it's three extremely different roles. And I mean, it's been a long time since I've seen The English Patient. I feel like my memory of Schindler's List is a little bit more fresh than English Patient, but like he plays them all so perfectly. He fits into them all so well.
Because he
And
fits into the 1940s and 50s so well. I think
Yeah,
all three of those take place within.
well, that's true. He has like, especially in the 90s, he had this very just like classic, leading man look.
Oh yeah.
Schindler's List, I think that's a different type of role there.
Well,
But,
no, yeah, because he was also very convincing as a Nazi.
yes, absolutely. But and it's incredible that he's really aged with his into the roles that he's been taking, whether it's in the 007 movies or of course the Harry Potter films.
Well, Wes Anderson and the Coen brothers.
My God, absolutely.
Grand Budapest Hotel, Hail
Yeah.
Caesar. I mean, if you listen to any episode of this podcast, you know how much we love him in Hail Caesar.
I know. Well, hey, that goes back to the 40s. So here we are.
There you go.
Lawrence Lorenz, big stands out here for Lawrence Lorenz. I would watch Merrily We Dance any day.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So I mean, I feel like for me, my memory of Quiz Show, and this was maybe the third time I've seen it. I think that like I saw it somehow, maybe on like HBO or something early on, and then I watched it at some point several years ago as an adult because I was like, oh yeah, I probably had no idea what I was watching at the time, and then watching it just the other day, and it's so enjoyable. I really love the vibe of it, the pacing of it all, the intrigue of this real scandal that went on, and like we talk about a lot, as one matures as a person and learns more about the world, you can rewatch movies and see things in them through a different lens. And I feel like that was my experience this time. And maybe it's, knowing more about the era and the Cold War. And I think that at the, maybe like the time I had seen it before this, certainly I was knowledgeable about, early television. And so I think that I watched it more like on a surface level then. And then this time I watched it with a more analytical eye. And it was a really enjoyable kind of like third viewing where it's not like, okay, I've seen this movie, I know what to expect. I'm just going to kind of have it on in the background. But instead it was like a full experience as if I was kind of seeing it for the first time. So that was fun for me. I don't know.
Cool. Yeah. For me, just to kind of add to what you were saying about the awareness of the era, I mean, I've seen this movie. I owned the VHS, but I never had it on like, DVD or Blu-ray.
Mm-hmm.
So I think my viewings of it were, over the last 20 years, maybe a little fewer and farther between. But definitely since the last time I saw it, I've just become much more educated about the 1950s, just based on when because I teach at least two books that are set in the 1950s, and you need the context of the 1950s to really, understand them. So I researched a lot. I read David Halberstam's whole book, The 50s, which I read that like a while ago. But just knowing and then kind of recognizing how this fits in, but also knowing about the era, and it helps you also recognize when you're watching a movie like this, what is probably not getting into the movie.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Yeah, there's so much more that that happens behind the scenes, not just behind the scenes of 21, but there's just so much more involved to these decisions in big business, and Geritol having a say over what's broadcast
Right.
on NBC, and what you have to do to be on the public airwaves, and accountability, and the way committees running Congress and things like that. So it's you watch it and that okay, this is not meant to be the blow by blow account of the entire investigation, I think, which was like 3 years.
Yeah.
So
Well, yeah, and also just to kind of talk a little bit more about the personalities, and these are the things that might not have been so much that like true to life, and I'm thinking more about like Herb Stemple, and like I don't know how accurate it is that his in-laws gave them a lot of money and he wanted to be the provider for the family and not have to feel like he ever owed them anything. And, I thought that was a really intriguing plot line, the motive for Herb to, do all the things that he did. And you get a lot from Herb based on just the way that he kind of lives his life, the way that he speaks to people, I don't know. He definitely comes across as somebody who is like, but I am owed this. I deserve this. I worked for this. And I'd be curious to learn a lot more about the real Herb Stemple, to see what exactly what he was like. I'm sure that there's some truth to the things that he would say and the way that he would speak, but like, to learn more about his motives. And he just is somebody who wants to like be known and to like have this platform, because he made his name, even if it was for, I don't know, I don't know, under false pretenses, as being a smarty pants, and he was a smart guy. And and I don't know, and there's a lot more to it in the fact that like they made him lose on such an easy answer, and I don't know if that was just to make it seem more justifiable that it was a rigged situation.
Well, John, because I'm a studious fact checker, I of course have Wikipedia open, and a lot of what I had read, and granted, my research on Herb Stemple did not extend beyond Wikipedia, but it seems like a lot of it is pretty accurate. I think his in-laws I think his wife, did come from a well-off family. And that was like, it was like 3 episodes in a row that he went up against Van Doren. It wasn't
right.
It wasn't just like,
there were 2 ties, I believe, before there was the win.
Yeah. And it was what motion picture won the Academy Award for 1955?
Marty.
Yeah. And it's just, have you ever seen Marty?
I remember seeing it, but I don't remember it.
It's so much. It is like when he says, I saw it 3 times. It makes perfect sense. Like Herb Stemple was the guy, like the underdog, because Marty is all about the underdog. And
it is kind of funny how like the situation in real life is like, wow, like you couldn't write this better.
I know, it's because that was one of the things I really wanted to know about, and I was like, okay, I need to at least like look into this somewhat. Like, I can't do hours of research, but I need to look into this somewhat because it just seems like so well scripted.
Yeah,
but it looks, at least according to Wikipedia, seems to be pretty accurate. But yeah, he was really smart. He went to went to Bronx High School of Science, had an amazing reputation. Was on their the quiz team.
Uh-huh.
And like they were undefeated. He did serve in the army. Looks like during World War II, but not like right at the end of the war.
Okay.
And but he stayed in the army, and he went to counterintelligence school.
Really?
Yeah. So it's really like this is a really interesting guy who and I think, and this kind of, I'm going to get into this in a little bit, but it seems like if it were not for like other factors, like this guy could have been like, had a, pretty significant position. Like he had the brains for it, but sounds like maybe there were a few other things that he had working against him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, quiz show.
I'm not sure because they talk about they reference him seeing a therapist in the movie, which I was looking for more about that, and I haven't really found anything more.
Well,
about
that's something that'd be kind of hard to verify. I'm sure that there's something somewhere. I mean, I guess you could always read Goodwin's book.
Right.
See what it says in there.
Yeah, and I'd be interested to read it.
And I will say, the screenplay was written by Paul Atanasio. Yeah, who was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay for this and for Donnie Brasco, just a few years laher, and also from the Bronx. So perhaps he has a particular interest in the in the Herb Stempel character.
Paulie, from Boston Road. Yeah.
Yeah, so also wrote Disclosure in 94, wrote Sphere, Sum of All Fears, The Good German. I remember when The Good German came out.
Yeah.
Good German, which also is a 40s.
Right.
It takes place in the 40s.
I remember liking that. I thought that was really well done. So anyway. And what's interesting is you look at Dick Goodwin died in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
Charles Van Doren died like the same, like a month, like within a couple of weeks.
Oh wow.
Of Goodwin. Yeah, wait, because Goodwin died May 20th, 2018, and then Van Doren died April 9th, 2019. Sorry, so almost a year later. And then Stempel passed away on April 7th, 2020.
Wow.
So almost a year to the day after Van Doren.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay.
I know, it's just these things that are just really kind of neither here nor there, but very interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, pour one out. Pour three out. Without those guys, we wouldn't have the movie quiz show. So there you go.
We wouldn't have that. And Richard Goodwin was also married to Doris Kearns Goodwin, the author and historian, who I met once.
Oh, really?
Went to go hear her speak with our father. Went down to Rutgers to hear Doris Kearns Goodwin speak, and he really wanted to meet her afterwards.
All right.
Cool. And I didn't realize then that was where the Goodwin came from.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Well, Dan, it's always a joy to revisit this movie, and I hope to watch it again in like 10 years and maybe see it through a different lens and experience it differently.
Maybe by then you will have been a contestant on a quiz show and you'll have
Well,
some
Dan,
insight. Oh.
you know that I was.
Oh, wait, yes. Tell the Starfighters about your quiz show experience.
Okay, so the year is 2007. I had just moved to Los Angeles from Philadelphia, and I did not have a job. I was trying very actively to find work. This was a time when it was still reasonable to go on Craigslist to try to find job listings. So I would go on Craigslist, amongst other places, and I would apply to any job that felt like it was something that, would interest me. My goal, of course, was to be in the entertainment industry and, specifically television. I was hoping for, narrative television. Instead, I ended up in, nonfiction television or in feature films. However, I had a hard time finding work for a while, and I was going through Craigslist, and I just thought, what can get me money? And I saw something looking for contestants for the pilot episode of a game show. And I thought, well, if I'm not going to earn it, I may as well try and win it. And so I submitted whatever they wanted me to submit. All I knew is that it was for the G4 network, which I don't believe exists anymore. But for anybody who isn't familiar with the G4 network, it was geared towards geeks. It was like very
video game
gamers,
oriented.
but it was also very just like pop culture-y, and it was just kind of like general geek dork stuff. And so I was like, great, perfect. I wear glasses. That why not? And so I sent in all my stuff or whatever, and then I got a call or email or something from them saying like, oh, we'd love to have you come in and audition. And I was like, okay. And nowhere ever did it say what this game show was. And so I was just like, sounds good. And then I go in to this like studio in Burbank, and I was just like, so what is the show? And they said it's a pop culture trivia show. And I was like, oh, hell yeah. And so they put me on camera and they asked me a series of like pop culture questions, which I nailed. It was just like, I'm pretty sure that I got all of them. And they called me back for another audition to do it again. And I was like, okay. And then they were just like, well, we'd love to have you on the pilot episode of this show. And I just said like, oh, fantastic. I was definitely going to be paid for like my time there. So at least there was that. And I show up the day of the taping, and there's just like a room full of people in their like 20s or whatever. And I was a little confused. And somebody from the network said like, or the production company came in and said like, so we actually need to do one more round of auditions for the like executives at G4 who are here. This is all in person. You're just going to get into these lines, and then you just kind of come up one by one and say this and answer a question or two and blah, 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 blah. And so I go through all of that, and they say, we're going to select 3 people, and then those are going to be people in the first round. And if there's time, we're going to bring out these 3 people to do another episode. And so I was in the first group, and it was me, another guy named John, which I felt like was a weird decision on their end, but they liked this guy for whatever reason. And then there was this girl who I don't even remember like being part of anything else, but it was like attractive girl. So it's kind of like, oh, okay, so you're going to have 2 people that the audience looks like, and then one person that the audience probably just wants to look at. And I'm just saying what is probably going on. And so that's when we find out what the show actually is. And so myself and the two other contestants are competing against each other in a game of pop culture trivia, but we're also competing against a 3-year-old chimp named Willie. And the show was called Beat the Monkey, and it never actually went to air. This was taped during the 2007 writers' strike, where they were just like, what can we do where we don't need writers? It was hosted by J. Keith Van Straten, who also hosted Beat the Geeks on VH1. I did an episode of my podcast, Hey Teens, where J. Keith Van Straten came on and we talked about it a bunch. It was really fun. And yeah, so I may as well just tell the whole story because we're here talking about quiz show. So that's also when I found out that in my efforts to get money, I would not be earning dollar points in this competition. The points were all bananas. And so, Dan, have I told you all this before?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Definitely. I'm enjoying
It's probably been a
it.
while.
But I remember as soon as you mentioned it, I remember pretty much all of this.
So, okay. So the first round goes, and I am by far in the lead. The other John gets asked to take his bananas and get the hell out of there. They hand him a tray of bananas. He walks out. And by the way, it's multiple choice answers, and we either hold up a card that says A, B, or C, and the chimp hits a button that's A, B, or C.
Now, wait, were the questions locked in a vault?
Not to my knowledge. I'm pretty sure that they were just scribbled on a note card.
John, were you given the answers beforehand? Did you need the money that badly?
I was most certainly not given the answers, and I even got a question wrong. That was a total Marty situation.
Oh,
where
no.
I'm like, it was. I don't remember exactly what the question was. I think it might have had to do with the Triple X movie, the Triple X State of the Union, like the sequel to that movie, and I had mixed up Ice T and Ice Cube, and it was just
Cube.
Cube
Cube was Triple X in that one.
Yeah, it was really upsetting for me. I don't know, but even that being said,
you teed when you should have cubed.
That said, though, I went on to the next round, and then I was still in the lead, and the woman next to me was, theoretically supposed to just be handed her bananas and asked to leave, but instead she had a chance to win back her bananas with a basketball free throw competition in which she and I threw foul shots, and Willie did slam dunks. And
Of course,
try as she might, she did not get enough bananas to catch up to me. And so it was just me and the chimp head to head. And then, Dan, here is where it gets very quiz show, because Willie and I essentially took turns answering the same questions, but I went first and Willie was in an isolation booth with headphones on so that he couldn't hear me or like anything, like he would know anything that was going on. But it was all pageantry, which is kind of amazing.
Did they coach the monkey? Did they coach Willie on how to mop his brow?
Yeah, right. So, and then the result of that is that, and at this point, it's like I had my 75 banana points. Those are all there, and it's just a matter of like who can answer as many of these questions within like 1 minute correctly, answers more of them. And Willie beat me by 1. And so Willie won a trip for 2 to Palm Springs, and I walked out of there with 75 bananas. So as I was leaving, I was like, so let me get those bananas. And they're just like, do you really want them? And I was like, yeah. Like, why not? I'm pretty sure I didn't take. I'm pretty sure that I didn't take all 75, but I definitely took a bunch of bananas. And I'd have to ask my roommate at the time if he remembers anything about me coming home with all those bananas, because we definitely both ate a lot of bananas for the next few days. But yeah, that was my quiz show experience. But it got shelved. Once the writer's strike ended, they just continued doing what they were doing. And during the course of time when I was working in television, a number of editors that I had worked with who had worked on G4 shows, I asked them, like, do you remember hearing about anything called Beat the Monkey going on around 2007? And some of them were just like, I do remember like editors working on that, but I have no idea. Like, I didn't see it. I just remembered hearing that people were working on that. And so there's a shelf somewhere in a storage unit with this on it. It's in the vault from Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Right. Yeah. So it didn't air because the writer's strike ended, not because it was called Beat the Monkey.
No, Dan, the set was like decked out. Like, it was all Beat the Monkey'd up. It was great. It was a full on, like, they call game shows shiny floor shows. Like, This was a very legit setup. It was amazing.
So the shiny floor that is slippery, plus you've got the banana peels. And
oh, forget it. It's just,
wow.
But I remembered when
what a story.
When we initially walked out to our like podiums or whatever, we were instructed, like, you are not allowed to talk to the other contestants. And the way that it was set up was like the other guy named John, the woman, me, and then Willie, who was like a little bit further away and had like his trainer like underneath his little podium and stuff. And so I just remember turning to the girl next to me and just saying, I love him so much.
For a second there, I thought you were going to do like, pull a W at the Trump inauguration and be like, this is some weird shit.
And yeah, no, seriously. Well, yeah, it essentially, we were all thinking it. But
yeah, I don't know what is more surreal, but yeah.
But, and I will say this for anybody who has seen the movie Nope, all I'll say is that Willie was 3, and once they get a little bit older, that's when they can no longer be on sets, and he needed to take breaks where he would go into a trailer with like his older brother and be a chimp.
Oh.
And not rip our faces off.
Got it. So you just go into the trailer, like, fight, piss, throw shit around.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what they did, but
and then it's like working with Dustin Hoffman in the early 80s.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, they gave him some blow, just let him do his thing. Yeah, so that was that. Dan, have you ever been on a game show?
I have never been on a game show. Man, I would have loved to have been on Beat the Geeks, first of all. I have a fond memory of that show. And
well, I mean, the Star Trek geek was Gabriel.
Gabriel from Trekkies. I know. Yeah. I remember the music geek. I really enjoyed the music geek on that. And I think I did like took the online test for Jeopardy.
I was wondering if you ever did that.
I would, yeah. I mean, Jeopardy's something that I could, the thrill's kind of gone now. Now that Alex is gone, but maybe someday.
You know what, Dan? It's still Jeopardy.
No, I know.
Yeah,
it is still Jeopardy, and someday. Who knows? Maybe.
Who knows?
But no, never been on a game show. So,
there you have it.
Yeah, hey, bucket list. There you go.
Well, Dan, let's talk just a little bit more about Quiz Show. I know that we don't typically do like true stories so much, but it makes it
Right.
more challenging to talk about doing a sequel or anything like that. But I don't know, what would you do given the chance to do something new with the quiz show verse?
Oh, well, easy. I would, do something about Beat the Monkey, of course. Do a quiz show style, like in the spirit of quiz show, Beat the Monkey. I don't know what else you would, I don't know working with Willie. No. So what would I do with so as I alluded to before, there's so much more than fits into this, sleek 2 hour and like 15-minute movie. There's so much more to the story. There's so much more to the people. I mean, Jack Barry, the host of
Yeah.
21, played by Christopher McDonald, like what happened to him? Like, how did this ruin his career? Did this, like, what happened to him after this? What was his experience while all this was going on? What did he know? What did he not know? There's so much more behind the scenes to this that I would want. I think like a series, like a limited series, would really do it justice. I know that there was a documentary prior to this, prior to Quiz Show coming out, that it like this basic like inspired the movie, the documentary, in addition to Goodwin's book. But I would let's see a dramatization, but like what's more, like what about Charles Van Doren? I feel like there's the slightest hint in this movie that Charles Van Doren was gay. And I don't, because they kind of show him like once he's famous and he's like this, NBC sponsored celebrity and he's out on the town with all these women, but he doesn't seem to have any, like relationships. I mean, he was married.
I do like how there wasn't any, romantic subplot.
Right.
And I suppose that it'd be hard to do that if there wasn't something like that in real life. And I know that you can still fudge things a little bit, but like,
he got married in 1957.
Oh,
yeah. So
there was something.
Right. There's more. Yeah. There's another life there. There's his family. We know that his father and mother were both renowned poets, and father professor at Columbia University. What's funny is if you look at pictures of the actual Charles Van Doren, he actually looks more like Paul Scofield than Mark Van Doren. No, he looks a lot like it is. It's kind of scary. I'm looking at this picture of him right now, and
Paul Scofield was so good.
Yeah. But there's so much more, like Herb Stempel. So like if Herb Stempel was, because they kind of talk about him as this uncredible witness who tends to exaggerate, and that like NBC was paying for him to be in therapy. And what was he having like in Quiz Show? I think they talk about him having like 5 sessions a week.
Right.
At some point. So I'm like, I want to know more about Herb Stempel. Like the character is, I don't want to go as far as to say one-dimensional in this, but there's more. He's kind of he's kind of a stereotype, and Turturro does great with him, and you look at the pictures of Herb Stempel, and it's pretty close.
Yeah.
So I want to know more, like what was going on. Like you said, like did he really was he really desperate for this money so that he could support his own family? What was going on with him? What about someone like Dan? Like who gets the idea for something like this?
Right.
And how do they, like, at what point do they say, like, okay, well, we're on the public airwaves, and we are committing a fraud, but it's also it's entertainment.
It's entertainment.
People are tuning in for and it reminds me, it brings me back to pro wrestling, because it's like the point isn't whether or not it's actual competition.
Who's being hurt here by, exactly.
Like, people
saying
tune
this
in
is all
because
true.
they want the drama, and sometimes drama comes from having, like, someone who you're like, oh wow, is this the week they're going to lose, and how long can they keep the streak going, like Ken Jennings on Jeopardy, and among others. There was the more recent example, and I forget her name, who was the more recent, like,
I think I remember who you're talking about, but I don't know.
Long win streak on Jeopardy, like last year.
It's like Kate something. For some reason, that name is jumping out of me.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I apologize, but
yeah, I agree. There's
tease
certainly.
It out.
What's that?
I'm like, let's take this story. Let's stretch it out. Let's get more into the Dick Goodwin. What made this guy tick? What was his was he really always smoking the cigar and all that? Like, what was his deal?
Yeah.
And I mean, like, fucking HBO that shit up. Like, let's do it.
You mean get Bobby Cannavale in there?
Get Bobby Cannavale? No, he's over at Netflix. Nope, he crossed the street. He's Netflixing now. He's out of the HBO stable.
I only say that because Dan and I had a text exchange earlier about Bobby Cannavale, and Dan referenced how he was the HBO's golden boy.
Well, because he was in that it was
he like Vinyl.
Vinyl, that was the show I was thinking of, and then was he on Boardwalk Empire?
Probably.
So anyway, and then I watched a couple of episodes of The Watcher on Netflix, which also has HBO favorite Jennifer Coolidge.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can't wait for the White Lotus season 2. I think that doing a series would be really smart. A really great way to, tell the story in a more complete way. If you were craving more, I think that the movie itself does as much as it possibly can do with the time it's given.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. But it also, like, if I can add, it also, like, it ties in. I think thematically you could connect. I think it actually connects better now, because now
Dan is coughing.
I think the American public knows a lot more about how, like, big business and media collude to present something to the American people, and whether it's to manipulate the American people, entertain the American people. But I think that we are much more aware of that connection, and seeing how far back that goes, I think that could be really something really interesting.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, I wanted to throw that in there, but yeah, what's your plan?
Oh, my plan. Well, watching Quiz Show, of course, makes me think of, and you can let me know if there's other ones that I just don't know about or I'm just not thinking about, but it makes me think of other movies like Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, in which there is a conspiracy going on behind the scenes of a extremely popular game show. And I'm Confessions of a Dangerous Mind is an adaptation from Chuck Barris's memoir, in which he claims that he was a CIA operative, and they used the dating game as a way for him to carry out his missions abroad. And it's a really fascinating claim because, like, of course the CIA is going to deny it. And then it's like, is this guy for real? So
you know what else it reminds me of?
What's that?
Ishtar,
exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, Confessions of a Dangerous Mind and Ishtar.
Confessions of a Dangerous Mind is much closer to Quiz Show, also because it's based in reality.
Yeah, it's the center of the Venn diagram of those two movies, of Quiz Show and Ishtar.
Sorry, I was trying to remember this. Oh god, that song that I love so much from Ishtar.
Serious Business.
Yes.
Dangerous Business. Business.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. No, I can't. So you're thinking of.
No. So okay, I'm thinking about this one, and I'm sure there are a lot of other game shows that have some sort of like mysterious behind the scenes goings on. Like, I mean, of course, there was like the press your luck, you know, the person who like figured out the sequence and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if there's a movie there, but like, I'm curious to know what else there is about game shows that could really fall into the same like series of just like, you know, what's going on behind the scenes.
Well, and this is
behind the seams.
I wonder. I mean, you know, just it makes me think of Ray Combs, one of the Family Feud host who committed suicide.
Right. Yeah.
What was going on there? I also think there's a potential story with Mark Summers.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I actually come to think of it, I wonder how much story there is around some of those like Nickelodeon shows, like Double Dare, especially as, you know, we kind of learn more about you know, how things work behind the scenes of shows like that. And we know, you know, Mark Summers, was OCD, like, yeah. And I think that could be like a potentially helpful story. I think that's more kind of like biopic than behind the scenes.
Yeah. You know, and I did work with Mark Summers and Harvey. So lovely gentlemen, really nice guys.
Well, no, yeah, I mean, yeah, Mark Summers. I mean, if, you know, the more you know about him, the more you know he really can be, you know, an inspiring.
Oh, person. Absolutely,
but yeah, I wonder what other shows and like also in what eras. Like, oh god, what about like Hollywood Squares, like 80s?
Oh, Hollywood Squares,
Jim J. Bullock Hollywood Squares. Yeah. Like, what was going on behind the scenes? Like,
yeah,
I want to hear about that.
Right. So I think that, yeah, Hollywood Squares would be a really fascinating one to
who would play Joan Rivers? I say Sherry or Terry. Little bit.
Actually, you know what? There's a really fantastic. I don't know if she's considered a comedian or actress. She actually hosted. Dan, did you ever do that like app game show thing, HQ? It was like at 6:00 every day. There's a live host. Scott actually knows one of the hosts. Our brother Scott is like friends with one of the old hosts of that. But like you could actually win money if you know, answered, you know, if you were a winner or something. And it was all done on an app. And one of the hosts, Anna Roisman, does a really fantastic Joan Rivers impression. I don't care for impressions so much, but the way that she does them on TikTok, I enjoy quite a great deal. But yeah, if we're talking Joan Rivers, fantastic. She also does a great Hilaria Baldwin.
I would have no idea. I have no idea what she sounds like, looks like, anything. But I just, yeah, the idea of just the 1980s incarnation of Hollywood Squares fascinates me. I don't know what, like, do you have a game show that you're like, oh man, I would love to find out if there's some like, you know, crazy shit going on behind the scenes of like this show?
Well, I think that what's really fascinating. Well, okay, so like Pyramid, I think is a great one where I'm thinking about like game shows that would make really fantastic sets for like set pieces for movies, and I feel like Pyramid is one of those. Hollywood Squares is a great one. You know, I think that it's just like they have these iconic sets, and because they include celebrity culture with, you know, average Joes essentially, I think that that's a really fascinating area to touch upon. Also, as we talked about at the beginning of this show, people in the 70s dressed cooler. Like,
Yes.
it makes so much more sense to like do something in, maybe like the later 70s, as opposed to like, I don't know. Well, although, okay, I will say though, doing a Double Dare show is a really fun way to, okay.
That would
Actually,
be
I
a
take
fun
that back.
movie set.
I take that. It'd be a fun movie set. I take it back because I feel like anytime that the 90s is portrayed, and I don't know if it's like high definition cameras just like make the spirals and weird like squiggly lines pop in a different way, but the fashions of the 90s, maybe it's teal comes across differently in 1920 by 1080, but it always comes across being like cartoonish and just silly. If you're trying to do something serious, it just takes the wind out of the sails. Whereas the 70s, there's a lot more beige and brown going on that,
The 70s are very cinematic.
So
very
the rust colors, your mustards. Oh, it's so great.
70s really look great on screen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Without a doubt.
I'd love to see something
Much like the 50s.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to see something. When did Hollywood Squares start? Probably late 70s, early 80s.
I think there was Hollywood Squares.
Was it even further back?
In like the 60s? Because who was it? Like Paul Lynde used to be on Hollywood Squares.
Center Square, I think. Big time.
Like,
So
I guess then, it was like,
I think that between that and Pyramid, I think that
66 to 80
okay
was the first, I think, like kind of the first run of it. I
Yeah.
remember watching it. I want to say like late, it says 86 to 89 when it was hosted by John Davidson.
Okay.
Who I've only ever seen in that and infomercials.
Yeah. I pretty sure Louis Anderson showed up frequently there before being host of Family Feud in the 90s.
Right. Yeah. Let me see who else. I think who else? Sandy Duncan. Oh, Weird Al. Was on a bit. Yeah, Charo was on there.
Pee Wee Herman, maybe. When I think of Charo, I think of Pee Wee Herman because they used to do
right.
She would appear on Pee Wee's Playhouse,
like his specials.
And it's like, and it's just like, what 9-year-old cares about Charo?
Yeah. And you remember who the announcer was for Hollywood Squares in the 80s?
Who?
Shadow Stevens.
Shadow Stevens.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. So Shadow Stevens. So Joan Rivers was like the permanent center square.
Yeah.
Jim J. Bullock was in there. Wait, I think like Howard Stern was on briefly. What?
Weird.
But yeah, I'm trying to remember, like, there were a lot of celebrities who Michael Dudikoff from the American Ninja movies, I remember was on there a lot. Oh man, it's driving me crazy. Like, I'm going to be thinking about this, like, the rest of the night.
So what's interesting about Hollywood Squares, I know that we are just like totally just talking about Hollywood Squares right now, but I'd love to know about the writing on that show, because certainly a lot of these, Joan Rivers might be coming up with some of these one-liner answers off the cuff, but like and Weird Al, but like I'm sure that Dudikoff isn't coming up with quippy responses and stuff like that. So I'd be curious to know about the writing process for some of the remarks on Hollywood Squares.
Wait, hold on. There was an E! True Hollywood story about Hollywood Squares, which makes me think there's something to this.
Ooh, okay. All right. Well, we'll be looking for that one on YouTube later.
Yeah. So anyway, that would be it's something that would be
game shows are so fascinating.
They are.
I feel like I know that there's definitely an audience for them currently. There's so many that are out there that, of course, there's an audience. I don't remember. I watched some vintage supermarket sweep recently, which I know came back with Leslie Jones as the host. And then I watched a little bit of Celebrity Family Feud because that's fun. It's Steve Harvey's delightful on that show. So, it's there's a whole world of game shows out there where I'm sure that there's ripe stories to be mined. And I don't know. If you know of any, please email us, ruinedchildhoodspod@gmail.com. Hit us up on our social media channels at Ruined Childhoods pod on Instagram.
Yes,
I can't remember.
Yes, at Ruined Childhoods pod.
I just go to our link tree. It's in the episode's description.
Yeah, and in the bio, in our Instagram bio, and our link tree, also can send you to our TeePublic store, where you can get wonderful things.
Wonderful things.
You could get wonderful things. You can get and the holidays are coming, so
get a bunch of mugs for trick-or-treaters.
Yeah, absolutely.
They love mugs.
You
can get stickers for the trick-or-treaters.
Yeah, or hey, maybe you're a trick-or-treater. Get yourself a tote bag.
Get yourself a treat.
Big. You could fit a lot of candy, even like full-size candy bars. You could fit in your bag.
Yeah, go to the rich neighborhoods. Get
or
those
hey,
king size.
Maybe you're gonna dress up as Bob Wiley for Halloween. You can get yourself a "Don't Hassle Me, I'm Local" T-shirt.
I'm vaccinated.
Oh, don't hassle me, I'm vaccinated. Right. Like, don't vaccinate me, I'm local? What?
Yeah. Dan, this was a lot of fun. Do you want to tell people what we're going to be doing on our next episode?
Yeah, well, our next episode should be a lot of fun because we're talking about 1967's Barefoot in the Park. Adapted.
I'm excited to talk about it, Dan.
Adapted from Neil Simon's play and starring Robert Redford and Jane Fonda.
And one of their many on-screen collaborations. Such a delight, and we'll talk about it on the next episode. But Dan, as you're heading out to somewhere in New Jersey, I forget exactly where where Mark Van Doren lives, but I wish you a good journey there.
Good journey.